To also hear the latest updates straight from the US, and that's why we're connected to Nova Purwadi from VOA. Hello, Mas Nova. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Marissa, Chrysia, and Paul.
Hi. So what's the latest updates? What can you report from there? Because I heard a lot of things about this inauguration. They say that they're going to scale it back. It's not going to be as celebratory as 4 years ago. And they say that they're also going to close the National Mall. So the U.S. citizens won't be able to celebrate and see the inauguration on location. What's the update?
Well, you can see me dressed in something that would not be out of place in an inaugural ball, but we're not going to have any inaugural balls. We're not going to have any of the usual ceremonial trappings that come with the four-year event in Washington, D.C., which is the transfer of power, the inauguration. Some events have been scaled back, and this has been done since the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of the events have been canceled, postponed, adapted, and of course with the attacks on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, this changes things even further. This is certainly an inauguration like no other because of the pandemic and also security concerns, and because of how unconventional it is. For one thing, the outgoing president, Donald Trump, isn't even going to attend the inauguration. He hasn't even mentioned Joe Biden in many of his speeches, including his farewell speech a couple of hours ago, where he basically mentioned the transfer of power, but mentioned nothing at all about the incoming Joe Biden administration. Now, usually in American politics, the outgoing president would even invite the incoming president to the White House, basically to show the peaceful transfer of power. That hasn't happened. A lot of things are really unconventional this year, and most of it is due to Donald Trump and how unconventional he is, and also the coronavirus pandemic, and also security. Now, interesting thing is, the U.S. Capitol has been pretty much on lockdown. There are 25,000 National Guard members here, on top of thousands of other police officers and other authorities here to basically ensure that there's no repeat of January 6th, and also basically to secure the Capitol. The interesting thing is, I don't know whether I have this complete Jabodetabek. Are there additions to that? The capital area in Jakarta. I remember when I lived in Cipayung, East Jakarta, it was still Jabodetabek. Now it's Jabodetabek. Maybe in the U.S., in the capital area, it's the DMV area. D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Southern Maryland borders D.C. Part of it is a suburban area of D.C. Northern Virginia is also a suburban area of Washington, D.C. Now, residents of suburban Virginia usually can travel freely to Washington, D.C. But over the past week or so, all the bridges to Washington, D.C. from Northern Virginia have been closed. A lot of the subway stations, the metros, have also been suspended. A lot of the metro stations won't be open on Inauguration Day. So there is a lockdown in the U.S. Capitol, especially around the National Mall area, where the most of the swearing in and a lot of the inauguration events are set to proceed on Wednesday, D.C. time. Paul, Marissa, and Chrysia.
Okay, we're looking at pictures. Obviously, we've got you there as well to give us an idea of what the situation is like. You've kind of given us images and mental images of what the situation is like. But what is it like? The vibe itself, the pulse of the people there. Obviously, this is something that's so different. Inauguration to me, whenever there's a new presidential inauguration, I'm always thinking celebration. There's the ball, and
Crowds.
it's more of just a big party.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing
It's
right
a
now,
big celebration.
yeah, exactly. And what I'm seeing now is it looks like a war zone. It looks like there's nobody's on the streets now. Obviously, this is apart from the fact, or compounded on the fact, that there is a coronavirus pandemic going on. But the security measures are way beyond what we know of for the coronavirus pandemic. And what I haven't seen is the citizens itself. What is it like, and what is the feeling like amongst the residents there over the past few days?
Well, there's an uneasy calm among residents here. They're rather reassured by the presence of National Guardsmen and a lot of these law enforcement officers that are basically locking down the city for the duration of the inauguration. I myself here am reporting from my home studio, a few blocks, 8 blocks, 9 blocks from the White House. And there is an uneasy calm in the U.S. Capitol at the time. Now, you'll also see, in lieu of the usually sea of people who are going to attend and observe the inauguration in person, there are now thousands, if not millions, of flags planted on the National Mall, representing 56 U.S. states and territories, in lieu of people coming to the National Mall. Now, everything has been in flux. We hadn't known about the exact itinerary, what's going to happen, what events are still going on, what ceremonies are still going on. But basically, everything has been in flux. But a couple of weeks ago, the Washington, D.C. mayor, Muriel Bowser, basically told residents, we have around 800,000 residents in Washington, D.C. She told them, stay home, watch it on television, celebrate from home. And that's what a lot of the 700,000 or so residents of Washington, D.C. Are doing. Yes, this is very, very different from previous inaugurations. The most well-attended inauguration was, of course, 2009, with the historic inauguration of Barack Obama, the first black president of the United States. That brought in 1.8 million people, estimated 1.8 million people. That brought a logistical challenge of its own, how to control the flow of people going in and out and wanting to watch everything and observe part of history. And at that time, there was that challenge of basically securing everything and ensuring people get to where they want to, but also ensuring that almost 2 million people get around the U.S. Capitol, which only has less than 1 million residents, to safely. That was a different challenge. The challenge this time, of course, is to basically secure the U.S. Capitol, lock it down. There's an uneasy piece, especially the closer you get to the security perimeter. Basically, on Inauguration Day itself, only security personnel and also journalists with proper credentials. I'll show you mine. I have the proper credentials for the U.S. Capitol. Mm-hmm. Only journalists with proper credentials and also members of the National Guard, law enforcement, are allowed at the location. Everyone else is encouraged to just watch at home. But of course, the main event in all inaugurations is of course, the swearing in. That will still happen at the U.S. Capitol. Joe Biden is going to be sworn in by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, and Kamala Harris is going to be sworn in by the Justice of the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor. Now, this is interesting because, as we know, Kamala Harris is the first black woman and also Asian American woman, Indian American woman, who is elected as Vice President of the United States. And Justice Sonia Sotomayor is the first Hispanic and also the first Latina who is a member of the Supreme Court. So we have a bit of history here, and also a display perhaps of the diversity of the U.S. population. Now, of course, after the speech, after the swearing in, everyone's waiting for the speech. You may remember from history books, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Yeah. That's from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That was from John F. Kennedy. Those are probably some of the most memorable inaugural speeches. The inaugural speeches will still happen, and that usually sets the tone for an administration. And of course, Joe Biden is expected to emphasize not only the coronavirus pandemic and also the economic devastation caused by it, but also addressing polarization, the increasing, the heightened, the extreme polarization that has happened in the U.S., which is probably not unlike what is happening in Indonesia, fueled by social media. And I overheard you talk about so many people now getting most of their news on social media. Pew Research Center says that half of young people, 19 to 30, get their most of their news from social media. For the general population in the U.S., it's a little bit less, about a fifth, I think. But that is the condition we find ourselves in, and that those are the issues, the polarization, the differences that Joe Biden has to address. Those events will still happen. Lady Gaga is scheduled to sing the national anthem. We'll still see some of those things. And usually all former presidents attend. But this year, Jimmy Carter and Rosalind Carter are not attending. The Carters aren't attending. The only people attending are Presidents Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and also President George W. Bush, and also President Barack Obama. They will also emphasize unity. As you know, President Clinton, President Obama are Democrats. George W. Bush is a Republican, and they will emphasize unity because on top of all the other inaugural events, they will also hold joint events to pay respects to the tomb of the unknown soldier, and all of these things emphasizing unity, which is also what we can expect from the inaugural speech of Joe Biden. Paul, Krizia, and Marissa.
Nova, we would like to know more about the incoming Biden administration and what impact could it have on Indonesia-U.S. relations. Tell us more.
The interesting thing is he has mentioned or announced a lot of his nominees for key posts. A lot of these have been well received among Washington circles and also among analysts because they are well-known people. One example is Anthony Blinken, who is nominated for Secretary of State. He's a career diplomat. He's very well known. He's a multilateralist. And also Janet Yellen, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is going to be nominated as the Treasury Secretary. That's the finance secretary or finance minister of the U.S. Comparably. And, these are experienced people. And also issues like climate change. Former Secretary of State John Kerry has been nominated as the special envoy for climate change. A lot of these figures are very multilateralist. And one of the main concerns or allegations of the outgoing Trump administration has been because it emphasized America first, it also emphasized unilateralism, and it also encouraged unilateralism among other countries. And so we see now a return to multilateralism which is why Joe Biden, in announcing his foreign policy team, said America is back. Basically, America is back to engaging the world, to working with alliances, to multilateral solutions for the world, perhaps. And with this, I think Indonesia can look forward to a more predictable and a more constructive, perhaps, relationship, and less erratic, perhaps. As we know, during the Trump administration, Indonesia's GSP status ended up being reviewed, and a lot of those things that caused concern and caused a little tension between the two countries. However, there is also now the issue of Congress being under Democratic Party control. Both the House of Representatives, which has a few years now been under Democratic control, but also the Senate is now going to be under Democratic control. Now, we know the Democratic Party is very, very critical of things like arms sales and things like that. We remember when Indonesian Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto visited Washington, D.C., Senator Patrick Leahy voiced protest against that. So you will see more critical voices in Congress, perhaps, in terms of Indonesia-U.S. relations, perhaps more scrutiny of some things and issues and things like human rights and everything, but perhaps a more consistent trade policy, perhaps a more consistent defense policy, especially considering the rise of China, which the Biden administration also has to face. But also, as we know, also during the Trump administration, he also emphasized more on leader-to-leader relationships. So his personal relationships with President Xi Jinping of China and also with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Now, a lot of these are going to maybe be returned to a more institutional government-to-government, agency-to-agency relations. So that is perhaps the major shift that could occur with U.S.-Indonesian relations, Paul, Krizia, and Marissa.
Right. Thank you so much, Nova Purwadi, for your very thorough analysis. We always enjoy listening to your analysis. We will have your analysis more after the break. And another thing that I was actually interested in asking Nova was what is the security like over there? Yes, Mas Nova, what is the security like over there, considering what happened on the 6th of January?
I mean, that is, of course, what's adding to all the extra security. People are, on top of the coronavirus pandemic concerns, there's also the security concerns. I mentioned that a lot of the bridges from suburban Washington, D.C. are being sealed, basically, especially from Northern Virginia. Now, several people, or at least one person, has tried to cross over with some ammunition. And I think also another person tried to cross over with false pretenses. And these have been, they've been arrested by law enforcement. It is really a different situation. We're not used to, in the U.S., of all these military personnel and also military vehicles on the streets. So this is a very interesting situation. Now, I have to add, there's also the tension. The tension is high. Political tension is high in the Capitol as well. As I've mentioned, President Donald Trump, and as you've mentioned as well, President Donald Trump doesn't even mention Joe Biden by name. A break with protocol and tradition, to say the least. But also, there's also a lot of tension in the U.S. because there is the upcoming impeachment trial in the Senate. Yes. President Trump has, one of the distinctions of President Trump is, of course, he's only been the third president in U.S. history to be impeached, but the first one to be impeached twice. And so the trial will shortly occur, And oddly enough, it will occur during the presidency of Joe Biden. And so there will be sort of a split screen, so to say, of, on the one hand, the Senate passing Joe Biden's coronavirus stimulus and other things and confirming his cabinet appointments. But also, on the other hand, the Senate perhaps conducting the impeachment trial. Now, what separates this impeachment process from the last one in late 2019 and early 2020 is it's rather more bipartisan. We saw in 2019 and 2020 basically all Democrats, with one or two defections, support impeachment in the House, and also the same in the Senate during the trial. Mitt Romney ended up being the sole Republican for removing the president. This time around, the impeachment vote in the House of Representatives saw 10 Republicans cross over the joint Democrats in voting for impeachment. The charge last time was rather maybe complicated, dealing with pressure on Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his family at the time. It was rather, perhaps not something that the average American cares for. But this time it deals with the Capitol, the attack on the Capitol on the 6th of January. The charge, so to speak, is incitement to insurrection. That's what makes it different. 10 Republicans in the House have voted to support impeachment. The way impeachment works in the U.S. is kind of different from other countries, where impeachment means you're gone. A president is basically removed with impeachment. In the U.S., basically, in the House of Representatives, the process is like an attorney. These are the charges against the president, and so they bring it to the Senate afterwards, the high chamber of the U.S. Congress, for a trial. What sets it differently from the last impeachment trial? Some Republicans are indicating that they are for removal. Some have not. Most have not. It requires 3/4 of the Senate to remove a sitting president, or even to vote for the removal of a president, and several other implications, including the loss of benefits and everything, and also they could bar him from running again for president. This time around, so many Republicans are rather coy in the Senate of whether or not they will support it. They're more open to the idea, and you have several Republicans openly supporting removal, including Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, the Republican senator. She is for removal, and so it's a much more unpredictable result. And it's certainly strange because it's happening after Donald Trump leaves office, but it still has implications for him, especially as an ex-president. Marissa, Crizia, and Paul.
Thank you so much, Nova Purwadi from VOA, for the thorough report. Another thing that America is facing at the moment is the COVID handling. Because previously with President Trump, it was a very interesting handling of COVID. Now Biden is way more strict. Even we've seen that whenever he was doing his speeches, he was wearing masks, and his team were wearing masks. His family members were wearing masks. So that's going to be a different phase of COVID handling in America.
Anyway, thank you so much to Mas Nova again. We hope that everything goes peacefully tomorrow for him. But we now go live to our next guest.